First time countdown's number 2 story. Tonight's worst persons in the world. The bronze to the person who donated the scratch for $10,000 worth of ads on the sides of buses in New York City promoting atheism. They read, "You don't have to believe in God to be a moral or ethical person." The hope from President Ken Bronstein of the group NYC Atheists is to get people to stop hiding their non-belief, to stop hiding it. No complaint about the message. However, while Bronstein says, we want to get atheists to come join us to get out of the closet, unfortunately, the donor who made the ads possible is keeping his identity anonymous. The runner-up boss Limbaugh, as we mentioned, the Supreme Court voted 5-4 to reverse the New Haven firefighters case, disagreeing with a lower 3-judge court which happened to include nominee Sonia Sotomayor. Or
the court found that she was indeed a racist, but there are things about this that, well, they did. I mean, let me tell you something. This is a 5-4 decision. The drive-bys and the state-run media saying it's a 5-4 decision along ideological lines. If you read Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you'll find out it's a 9-zip decision.
Look, seriously, Rush, if you've fallen off the wagon or if you feel like you're losing your grip emotionally, I'm dead serious about this. Get to a doctor or a clergyman or a shrink or somebody. If not, what the hell, dude? You're just starting to make stuff up. The Supreme Court votes 5-4 and you decode that as 9-0. So you say you have 30 million listeners a week and I can say, no, you got none. And here's why. Big bag of mashed up jackass. But our winner, Joe the plumber, he's moved from performing plumbing services without a license to lying, to working for a political party without disclosing it, to encouraging repeal of freedom of the press, to fomenting violence against elected officials. But first, the comic relief. Speaking at Wausau, Wisconsin about the founding fathers, Wurzelbacher said, quote, "They knew socialism doesn't work. They knew communism doesn't work." Okay, this is why you should have paid attention in school and not just sat there practicing with your snake. The Founding Fathers, the Declaration of Independence, that was all about 50 years before anybody thought up socialism or communism. Now the evil part, the Wausau Daily Herald writes, referring to Senator Chris Dodd, Democrat, Connecticut, more than once, Wurzelbacher asked, why hasn't he been strung up? See, now what strung up means, Joe, is to hang somebody, to lynch them, to kill them. Joe Wurzelbacher passively just called for the assassination of an elected U.S. senator, and some law enforcement agency should go make it clear to him that this is not only immoral, but also might just be illegal. Samuel Joe the Lynch Mob Wurzelbacher, today's worst person in the world. A quick recap of the hour's breaking news in the Michael Jackson investigation. L.A. County coroner's officials took 2 plastic bags full of evidence from Jackson's rented home today. The Los Angeles Times is reporting that these were not the prescription drugs found when Jackson collapsed last Thursday. These were older medications. The Times also reporting this is part of an investigation of whether Jackson was using multiple doctors to get prescription drugs. Speaking of doctors, Elvis had one. Anna Nicole Smith, the Beatles, wrote a song about one. As questions arise concerning the man who was Michael Jackson's personal physician, in our #1 story, just what role Dr. Conrad Murray played in Mr. Jackson's life and death yet to be determined. Murray surfacing this weekend to talk with L.A. police after they had impounded his car, after he had disappeared briefly, immediately following Mr. Jackson's death. Dr. Murray's lawyer, Edward Chernoff, saying Murray found Jackson unconscious Thursday, but still warm with a faint pulse. Chernoff confirming that Murray administered CPR to Jackson on Mr. Jackson's bed, although Chernoff points out that the bed was a firm one. Chernoff also maintains Murray never prescribed nor administered Demerol nor OxyContin to Jackson. The Reverend Jesse Jackson stating the Jackson family requested a second autopsy in part because of questions the family has about Dr. Murray, and the family claiming Dr. Murray has not spoken to them since Jackson's death. Mr. Chernoff, making the morning talk show rounds earlier, says Murray has spoken indeed with members of the Jackson family, including his mother and his children.
I can't explain how the Jackson family might feel under these circumstances, and I don't want to judge the decisions that they're making and the accusations that they're making as sinister in some way. I don't know why they're doing this. I can say this. When the investigation's complete, when toxicology is done, when everything is finally resolved in this case, Dr. Murray will be exonerated, and maybe they'll feel differently.
Mr. Chernoff also maintaining that Dr. Murray, quote, looked into Jackson's physical condition and found no evidence that Jackson was not fit to perform at an upcoming series of sold-out concerts in London. Quoting, there was nothing that Michael Jackson told him that led him to believe that he was not capable of making this tour. Joining us now to talk about the doctor and the drugs, investigative journalist Gerald Posner. Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you for some of your time tonight.
Good to be with you, Keith.
That last statement from Mr. Chernoff seems to me a little bit confusing here. Would not past medical history play into whether or not somebody is fit enough to go on a tour? Why would a doctor rely solely on what his patient tells him, especially when the patient is Michael Jackson?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're talking about a tour, tens of millions of dollars are at stake, and you come in and you have to find out about the patient's, history. You need to know more than just what the patient tells you. The problem with Jackson is you can't go to one family doctor and say, by the way, what's his last 10 years been like? This is a fellow who's had doctors around the world. He's got a doctor in London. He has a doctor in the United Arab Emirates where he spends months at a time. He's got a doctor on the East Coast. There's several doctors in Los Angeles. So I think that the problem with Dr. Murray is he stepped in at the wrong time. He stepped in when the star died. He came in May all of a sudden when the insurance company said, by the way, we want you to take care of him and go on tour with him. And the next thing you know, he's giving him CPR on a, quote, firm bed. And so this turns into the nightmare. He happens to be the doctor standing watch when Jackson actually dies. But he's not the doctor who was prescribing the pills for Jackson that have made up this prescription drug addiction for him for years.
And this pertains, Gerald, to that breaking news at the LA Times citing that those bags that we're showing right now, that's not just that's not the stuff that supposedly was in his system the last few weeks. That's old material. That's a stockpile. He's got he had a library full of past prescriptions.
Yeah, well, that's the great thing. The past prescription history allows the Los Angeles police to build up the case and find out who the doctors were, who were the Dr. Feel-Goods in this case. For instance, I mean, I happen to live in a state in Florida in which we have drug clinics in which you can go in if you have pain, and you can, for $100 every month, walk in and get an OxyContin prescription. The great thing in Florida is they're going to start next year, but right now, you don't find out if you go to multiple doctors. So you can doctor shop. You can do 2, 3, 4 doctors at a time. For celebrity, Keith, this is automatic. You can get prescriptions anytime you want from any number of doctors. There are concierge doctors and private doctors who will write OxyContin and Demerol prescriptions for Michael Jackson, and they'll do it around the clock. He can have multiple doctors doing that. But what they will find with these pills taken out today is who those doctors were, if they were over-prescribing, why they weren't monitoring him. And then the real question comes back to the current doctor, Dr. Murray. Why wasn't he more aggressive in finding out what that prescription history was?
Well, as you portray him here, kind of the loser in a game of medical musical chairs, what do we know about him? I mean, he was claiming to be a cardiologist and is not board certified, and he did seem to have a certain a period of time where he tried to handle this situation by himself, half an hour or so before they called 911. Are these bad signs?
It's premature. It's too early to tell. But let me tell you this thing. It's never good to have the king of pop die while you're the doctor, the only doctor at his house. And then when you're doing CPR, you have to have the CPR people, the EMT people tell you 911 on the telephone. By the way, don't keep him on the bed. Thank goodness it wasn't a water bed, but put him on the floor where at least it's a little hard surface. And then the doctor refuses to go in the ambulance with his patient, who he's been hired to take care of, to the hospital. Then he refuses to sign the death certificate. I must tell you, as a lawyer, that's the only smart thing I think he did, was refuse to sign the death certificate, because at that point he was saying, I don't know what killed him. I don't know what was involved here. I'm not his regular doctor, and therefore you're going to have to do an autopsy and find out.
Do you have any idea in brief where this is going to end up legally?
Oh, this is going to make lawyers wealthy. There are lawyers licking their chops around the country. This is going to be years of litigation. We're going to be talking about this in terms of the estate for years to come. Kids
in the 8th grade right now will eventually serve as lawyers in this case. Investigative journalist Gerald Posner. It's always a bizarre subject that brings us together, but it's always a pleasure when it does. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
That's countdown for this, the 2,251st day since the previous president declared mission accomplished in Iraq. I'm Keith Olbermann. Good night and good luck.